For centuries, this thing was the most dominant weapon on the planet. A sleek, bronze-tipped spear of a ship that gave Athens its empire and basically controlled the Mediterranean. And then, poof, it just vanished. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of the Olympias, an absolutely audacious attempt to rebuild the ancient world's lost superweapon, the trireme. And that right there, that's the central mystery, isn't it? You've got ancient writers telling us these ships were incredibly fast and agile, but for nearly 2,000 years we had, well, no real idea how they actually worked. So how on earth do you recreate a machine when you don't have a single surviving example to look at? That's the question a team of historians, naval architects, and enthusiasts set out to answer. Okay, so what you're looking at right here, this is the blueprint that kicked the whole thing off. And this isn't just some drawing, right? It's a hypothesis, it's a best guess, reverse engineered from fragments of history, showing this radical design with 3 stacked banks of oarsmen. The challenge was, could this beautiful, super complex theory actually work in the real world? To really get a handle on just how big of a challenge this was, we first have to appreciate why the trireme is basically a ghost. You know, the reason why we have no wrecks is actually fascinating. Unlike those big, heavy cargo ships that would sink straight to the bottom and get preserved in the mud, triremes were built to be super light. They were unballasted warships. So when they got damaged or were abandoned, they probably just broke apart and floated away, their timbers lost to the sea forever. This left archaeologists with, well, pretty much nothing. So, with no wreck to study, the team had to get really creative. They came to a pretty wild conclusion. The only way to truly understand the trireme was to build one. They basically turned into historical detectives, piecing together clues from all over the place. Literary sources gave them the names for the 3 different ranks of rowers, pottery and stone carvings gave them a rough idea of what it looked like. And this next part is just brilliant. The excavated foundations of the ancient ship sheds in Athens gave them the absolute maximum length and width the hull could be. And look at this. This is the result. From scattered clues in academic papers to this, a full-scale 37-meter-long trireme taking shape with funding from the Hellenic Navy, no less. It was a massive undertaking, turning ancient history into a modern engineering project. But listen, building it, that was only half the battle. Now they had to see if it would actually work. All right. Time for the sea trials. And this, my friends, is where the dream met the cold, hard, and very wet reality of the Aegean Sea. Now, the legends set the bar incredibly high. Historians like Thucydides wrote about triremes making these astonishing voyages, which would suggest sustained speeds of 7 knots or even more. The Olympias was built to find out if those accounts were fact, or maybe just a little bit of historical fiction. And here's the hard data. During a pretty grueling voyage back in '92, the reality was, well, a whole lot slower. Rowing into a typical headwind, the crew struggled to even keep it at 3 knots. I mean, look at this. On one particularly brutal 11-hour day, they averaged just 2.9 knots. So yeah, those legendary speeds, nowhere to be found. And that was just the start of their problems. It was like the ship itself was fighting them every step of the way. The long, light hulls started to bend in the middle, a problem called hogging. Oars were snapping, left and right. We're talking up to 15 of them on a single trip. Even little things, like some copper strips on the oars, would get tangled and bring everything to a sudden, jarring stop. And you can just imagine the physical toll on the volunteer crew. It was absolutely immense. And all of that brings us to maybe the most critical part of this whole machine, the one thing you can't design with a blueprint. The crew, the human engine. Just think about that number for a second, 170 people. That's how many are packed into this long, narrow wooden hull, all of them needing to move in perfect, synchronized harmony just to make the ship go. This wasn't some sailing ship with a few extra hands on deck. No, this was a machine powered entirely by people. And this image really shows you what that effort looked like up close. Every single one of those 170 spots demanded immense strength and endurance. The space was cramped, the air was hot, and the work was just repetitive and punishing. Getting this human engine to run smoothly, well, that turned out to be the biggest puzzle of all. And what's so cool about this is that even the experts were figuring it out and disagreeing as they went. On one side, you had Boris Rankov, an experienced rowing coach, looking at it from the top down, all about timing and rhythm. On the other, you had Paul Lipke, the ship's carpenter, looking at it from the bottom up, focused on how the ship's design was causing problems for individual rowers. This whole debate was absolutely essential to the learning process. So, okay, after all this, decades of building, rowing, breaking things, and fixing them, what did this grand experiment actually teach us? Okay, what you're seeing here is just incredible. On the left, you've got the actual remains of a Roman-era oared ship, and on the right, the inside of the Olympias. The project literally became a bridge across time, connecting the tiny bits of archaeological evidence we have with the living, breathing reality of how a ship like this could have actually worked. And this whole thing has a name. It's a field of study called experimental archaeology. It's not just about digging stuff up. It's about rebuilding it to see how it works. It's all about testing what we think we know by actually getting your hands dirty. And the Olympias, it's pretty much the poster child for this. And the specific lessons they learned were invaluable. They figured out the oar system was seriously flawed, the hull as they built it was probably way too weak for actual combat ramming, and, some of the biggest takeaways were incredibly simple and human. Turns out cushions weren't a luxury, they were essential. And think about it, a rower burning all those calories in the Greek summer needs a liter of water every single hour. So when you boil it all down, the Olympias wasn't a perfect replica. Of course not. How could it be? Its real success wasn't about giving us all the answers. It was about showing us how many of our assumptions were probably wrong. It replaced old, simple questions with new, much smarter ones about everything from naval architecture to human physiology. This whole project proved that sometimes the only way to really understand the past is to try and rebuild it piece by piece. And that leaves us with a really fascinating thought, doesn't it? If we learned this much from reconstructing just one lost technology, what other incredible secrets are still out there, buried in old texts and forgotten ruins, just waiting for someone bold enough to try and bring them back to life?